Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. It is I, Joe. Joining me, as always, you know him, you love him, you hate to see him in your finals table because he's literally always there, glued to the seat. Atlas.
Hello, everybody.
This week, we're talking proxies, we're talking budgets. We kind of skip all over the place in this episode, but we mostly stick to kind of our experiences with proxies. Our shop being a weird, unique example because we historically haven't allowed proxies, but times are changing. We kind of get into the whole meat and potatoes of that whole conversation. But if you want to hear more, you should come on down and get a drink with us.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode on Mana on the Rocks.
Yeah, welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. Sorry we took a break last week. I mentally needed a break, and you, Atlas, needed you were just spent, right?
Yeah, I was sick all week last week, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, it was unscheduled, unprompted, but I know, especially for if anyone's listening out there, there are a couple of you who were asking about us, and if we were what was up with the show at the Eternium Lodos event that I just played. So thank you for inquiring. It's really great to hear that people are listening and care about what we have to say. But yes, we're back, and we're gonna be back on our regular schedule now. We just life happens, and we needed to take a week to recover.
Yeah. It was totally impromptu. Me and you just didn't talk, and I'm like, in my head, as soon as I got home, because I get home from work and we record these usually, home from work and we record these, and I was just like, I just couldn't. I was so drained.
Yeah,
but
if I could have gotten out of bed to message you, I probably would have, but I wasn't doing it.
I'll be straight with you. I probably wouldn't have responded.
I probably wouldn't have responded.
It all works out. It all works out.
No, I appreciate all of it. We got some messages from people wishing us well. And that's sweet. I appreciate all of you a lot. I'm glad that we make something that everybody enjoys. Speaking of something that everybody enjoys, this week's topic we're talking kind of proxies and budgets. We had some discussion in the Discord the other day.
But before that, something else for everyone who's listening. For things for all of you to enjoy, we are working on, and I don't know when this will happen exactly, but we are working on getting some extra goodies to start passing out at events and things like that. Stickers was the big one that people asked about. Quick, easy, so we're looking for those, and then maybe some other stuff here in the future.
We got some goodies that we're cooking. I'm in the stew. Atlas is also in the stew.
We're working on a couple of projects to sort of try and push us up to the next level, as it were. We're working on maybe setting up a Patreon so we can start to produce merchandise a little bit more efficiently, so that we don't have to pay for quite all of it out of pocket. And then it'll also give us an excuse to buy a video camera, maybe record some gameplay videos and things like that for y'all. So yeah, stuff in the works. We'll tell you as we get more updates, but it's exciting.
Yeah, we're still ironing out a lot of the kinks, figuring out exactly the vision for it. But we got Mana on the Rocks we're gonna start going big. We're gonna start going big mode. I'm excited for it. There's a bunch of stuff that I want to do and things that we had talked about, and we were both like, oh yeah, this will be cool to do eventually. And I feel like we're starting to approach that eventually.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited for it. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah. Excited to play events with you all. Events with proxies, which, like we said, is the topic for today.
Yeah.
Proxies and budgets, things along those lines.
Yeah. So I think me and you, in at least most of the content space that I'm aware of, are our shop is unique insofar as our weeklies and our majors are all non-proxy.
Yeah, they have been in the past. Good news for everybody.
Is it official that we're doing this?
Is it official? I believe it is official. I believe
okay.
It has been confirmed that for the next major at Gabby's Olympic Cards and Comics, which is our home shop, for their OCCS, which is the Olympic Commander Challenger Series, they will be allowing 10 proxies per person, which, while not full proxy, is a step in the right direction. And it is something that will hopefully encourage more players to come and join.
Yeah. I'm happy for it. I don't personally play many decks that require a lot of proxies. I get to play duels that I don't own. That's pretty cool. My life total will be at 35 instead of 28 going into my turn 3, which is pretty cool. But yeah. But yeah, our shop, this being kind of a landmark moment for us, like moving forward to allow proxies, I think is going to just, I think it's ultimately going to be beneficial, and I think I'm all right with the cap of 10 right now. I think I obviously would like to see it be full proxy, but we'll kind of get into that discussion because me and you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Generally
pro
speaking,
proxy.
I'll just get ahead of it. I'm pro proxy. Like I don't care if events are full proxy or not. I straight up don't. Play proxies all you want. I just need to be able to identify the card from a glance and understand it. That's all I require from a proxy. But that's how proxies are the community's solution for Wizards greed. Straight up, that's just my stance on it. Like they are a fundamental necessary thing that we as players need because reserve list cards are expensive. And they don't give us those expensive cards, so how else are we supposed to play the game?
Well, it's not even reserve list cards necessarily, right? A lot of these like key staples like Mana Crypt, Vault, things like this have been reprinted in recent memory. Jeweled Lotus, especially, is a newer.
Oh yeah, that's a recent one.
Printed way after the reserve list, but it's pretty expensive. And then they see reprints, which tanks their prices a little bit, but they go back up, and then they go back up higher than they were when they were reprinted because these extra reprints are new products, which encourages additional people to play the game, and it's just one extra way to encourage buyers. So proxying, part of the initial push for proxies in the format was like this idea of like a curated list of things that could be proxied, which most, if not all of which, was on they were on the reserve list, like really expensive cards like Dual Lands and Gaia's Cradle, things like Time Twister. Obviously, all these cards that are going to be unattainably expensive, but even more than that, proxies are really important to be allowed for other cards too, which is why I really like the idea. Is even if proxies are going to be limited, just like 10 proxies, whatever you need, because some players, like, people come from different circumstances, right? So some players might have had an uncle who was around in Magic when it first started, like, getting played. They're like, oh yeah, here's all my old cards, and they have a set of Dual Lands, even though they're beat to hell on the sidewalk, just
sleeve
because,
playable.
Yeah, but they're sleeve playable. But what they don't have is like a Jeweled Lotus or a Mana Crypt, and so they really need those cards for the deck to be truly CDH. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, if it comes down to a dual land or a shock land, like if you have to pick between one of those to play deciding if a deck is unplayable, or if you have to decide between like Mana Crypt and Worn Power Stone, like you can pick one to proxy. You can either sub the dual land with a shock land, or you can play Worn Power Stone in place of Mana Crypt while using the dual land. You take the Mana Crypt, dude. The card's better, and that's a really extreme example, but Mana Crypt's like $300, just about.
Is it up to $300? I thought it was still like hovering on like 160. Or like
I believe it has gone up. I could be mistaken. I thought I looked at something the other day, saw it like 260. So
cardkingdom.com.
Here we go. We're looking it up. We're finding out just how delusional I am, which is pretty delusional.
But you can get a copy for like under 200.
You can get a copy for under 200. Either way, though,
still ridiculous.
$200 for a card.
Insane amount for a Magic card.
A card that's actually been printed so many times too.
It's a decent amount of times. Like it has like one, 2, 3, like 3 actual like set reprints. It's got the original old border. It's got 2 fancy versions or 3 fancy versions if you count the Judge promo.
Yeah. So
it's been printed a decent amount of times.
It's been printed a decent number of times, and that's a lot of different places and like ways to get a hold of it. But it's so important and popular. Like Mana Crypt literally goes, and I would say every single deck. There's probably some weird deck out there that doesn't want to play it for whatever reason, but aside from that one fringe strategy, Mana Crypt goes into every single deck.
Yeah, right? It's like straight up just does. Yeah,
it's like Gemstone Cap. It's like you're just gonna play it because you can. But Mana Crypt is just still so expensive.
Yeah, and I think Mana Crypt specifically is such a poster child for a lot of these things because, like you said, it does go into every deck. Like even your like oof decks where you're shaving off every single rock except for literally the best ones. Like you start with Mana Crypt as like the first rock you put in that list because it casts your oof on turn 1, it casts your null rod on turn 1. Like even the decks that hate artifacts, you still play Mana Crypt because it's just insane. Like the power level spike that you get from having a Mana Crypt in your deck is substantial. And I didn't think it was going to be substantial until I was able to get my copy of it.
Yeah. The variance is there for sure, but
like their turn ones with mana crypts and without mana crypts, night and day difference.
Absolutely.
You win and lose on those.
Even turn twos, right? Like people, you play Enlightened Tutor, you play Imperial Seal a lot of times to go grab mana crypt on turn 1, so that on turn 2 you play a mana crypt. And this is personal experience, very immediately relevant from this past weekend. Let me tell you, if you Enlightened Tutor for a mana crypt and you cast it on turn 2 and it enters tap and you can't even use it till turn 3, it's still such an absolute house of a card. Like, you've just boosted your mana pool by 2 on the turn that you're able to use it for realistically 1 mana, and you've also thinned your deck, so you're not having a dead draw when you don't want to see mana crypt. You want to see something that's more powerful.
It's just insane. The more and more Magic continues, the more and more I'm like, the current reprint policy just isn't enough. Just isn't. And I can get into a whole diatribe about this, but like I think everyone agrees like the Magic cards should just be straight up more accessible. Plain and simple.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I do think that like it is trying to walk a fine line right now between like Magic I think is suffering from an identity crisis, right? They're trying to decide whether or not they're a CCG, which is a collectible card game, or they're a sport. And right now, like with the push for Arena to become the primary format and all these things, and like, but also talking about like they were talking about, it might not have been Grand Prix, but WotC wanted to start sanctioning events somehow again. What was it? It was something with was it RCQs? Was it regional championships?
I think they wanted to like it's old news at this point.
Yeah,
it's
older news.
They wanted to bring back the Pro Tour circuit or something like
along
that.
Those lines, right?
Yeah.
And so like with all of that, like all of those things push the game towards being like more of a sport, right? Like something along the lines of chess with cardboard. Obviously there will be differences, but that's the best comparisons, like, because by all reasonable human standards, chess and similar games like Go or like even backgammon, those things are considered sports. Poker is a great example when we're talking about CD.
I think that's probably the closest one for one, yeah.
But poker literally gets aired on ESPN, and Magic has been aired on ESPN in the past. Magic tournaments have. So it's really like those things push Magic and Magic players towards the direction of, we are a sport. We want to see people playing competitively. We want to see what they can do with the game. And so we're going to focus on like printing these cards and making them accessible, and new cards to tweak the game in new ways, and like sort of curate formats and things like that, right? But then like on the other end, they still want to be a CCG with like different treatments, and like you can collect this version and that version, and like here collect the whole set, and this card is rarer than that card, and here's the like players too, right? Like, oh, my original printing is cooler than like this newer version, and like this set symbol is cooler than that.
I'm a stickler for that myself.
Yeah, right? Like we all have preferences about those things, but those all lean into the collectible element of the card game, and by trying to be collectible inherently pushes the game more towards that dynamic of it wants to be rare. It wants to have scarcity within its product in order to drive consumers and players to collect, because there's some intrinsic reward of like, oh, I have sought after this card and I've saved up for this card and I've obtained it, but then also just like the prestige thing within the community, right? You're like, look, like my collection is more valuable than yours because it is, and therefore it is more impressive than yours, because collectible things just inherently gain their import from the fact they are worth more due to them being more scarce. So it's just a weird spot that the WotC, the creators, just have to settle on whether or not they want it to be a sport, or they want it to be a CCG, or they want to continue like stumbling through this middle ground where no one's really happy with them, but like also most of your base isn't angry with you either. So
are you, so just out of curiosity, because I think other card games have solved that issue. Are you familiar with how like Pokemon does its card distribution at all?
I can't say that I am. I don't really follow Pokemon or
So
anything like that.
the way Pokemon handles it, and I personally think this is the gold standard for any sort of card game that wants any sort of competitive footing, is there's always two prints. There's a cheap print, and then there's the crazy fancy expensive print. And Magic
the
has
chase
been getting
versions.
better.
Yeah.
There are chase versions, and then there are basic versions, and Magic has gotten significantly better at providing those options. I still think that there is a long way to go. I think there's a lot of staples that need to just be printed into the ground. You can maintain the high prints. So it's the same reason as like if you were to put dual lands in the next Corsa and Wilds of Eldraine, your betas are still going to hold their value. They're going to drop, maybe they're going to change in price for sure, probably, but they're still going to hold like 95% of the value, most likely, because that specific print is going to hold a lot of history, a lot of value, a lot of this, that, and the other. And a lot of card games have mostly followed that market of having the chase print, the super fancy, cool prints with all like the
rainbow rares and things.
Rainbow
right?
rares and full arts and texture foils and like these crazy cool cards that are sick to open up and like high value and that's fantastic. I think that is a wonderful place for a card game to be, because you create incentive and want for people that want to open packs, because you want to chase those cards. Collectors are happy because there's high value things that they can like do their investing thing or whatever. And your grinders and your players are happy because all of these cards that you want to play with, that you want to own, are going to be readily available and affordable because all of those packs are being cracked. The high value cards being sold. This $50 card has a $2 variant. Like, if I want to play the game, I'm just going to get this card because I want to play the game. I don't care about. I'll worry about the fancy version later on if I like the deck. But for right now, I just need these cards. So give me the cards, please. I think that's a fantastic way to go. I think you hit the nail on the head with like Magic is caught in the middle of it doesn't know what it wants to do, and it keeps printing staples that are expensive and not hammering the staples that need to be printed more, and it is frustrating because there are solutions out there that have worked in the past and just aren't.
You raised so that distribution system does seem like it works really well. Thinking back, I now know what you meant by distribution. Yes, I'm aware of like the rainbow cards and all this stuff for Pokemon, like the ghost holos or whatever for Yu-Gi-Oh, things like that, right? These things have insane values. I think the major difference with Magic, from my very uneducated, uninformed perspective, is that Magic is substantially larger as a card game than basically any other TCG out there.
That's correct.
So it's worldwide. There are dozens and dozens of heavily played formats. Okay, maybe not that many, but they're like 6 really heavily played formats, which is twice as many as anything else, at least.
Yeah.
And so there are all of these different ways to play the game. You need different numbers of copies of cards, different numbers of copies of cards for each of these formats. Like sometimes you need a 1 of for things like Commander, sometimes you need a 4 of for something like Modern or Pioneer. And so there's all of those. Plus there's sealed product with draft and things like that. I think that that difference of how large the game is, I could be totally wrong, but it doesn't seem, just at a glance to me, it doesn't seem as though the same practices would scale particularly well. And I think that's why Magic has introduced these gradients a lot. And I don't play Pokemon, but it seems like there are a lot more gradients of rarities of cards in different prints, right? So you have the base print of Mana Crypt is our default example for this episode, it seems. So you have this base print of Mana Crypt in Double Masters, right? Which runs you at a hefty sum of like $120 on release. But also then there's a full art version of this card, where the art changes and it has no border, and that's more expensive. But then also there's a full art and foil version of this card. There's also a regular foil version. So it's like base version, base foil, full art foil. So there's 4 different gradients of the rarity, and each one of these is going to have different, or at least has the potential to have different price markups. And so I think that's sort of, they're trying to do it, they're trying to flood a market, a secondary market of players with all these copies of cards, while also not oversaturating the market, because at that point, if you're going to oversaturate the market to that degree, why not just let everyone print their own cards and just get whatever they want, which is kind of why it seems like Wizards pushes Arena more and more. It's like, because if you play Arena, like, granted, you're restricted in the fact that you have to do things the way the AI wants, and you have to like play only the formats that are allowed at that specific time. So it's like not super all encompassing. There aren't cards from every set out there. You obviously can't play Commander because the pool doesn't encompass enough. But if you play Arena, they have these wild cards that you can make into whatever card you want. You just have to like obtain the wild card, which is done by achieving an in-game achievement or paying money. And so if you do it like that, then you don't have to worry about print run issues, because everyone gets the cards they want when they want them, as long as they have the resources, whether that's in-game currency or real life currency that they're converting into an online resource, right? So I think at least from my perspective, it's just like a scaling issue with how popular Magic is comparatively to these other things. That, like, Pokemon especially, like, yeah, there's a pro scene, yeah, they like play competitively or whatever, it's not. It's realistically, it's just a collectible game, which is why those chase cards have astronomical values compared to like chase versions of stuff in Magic, is because everyone is playing Magic for like 99% of the population. They're playing it to play. They're players, they're gamers. Whereas with Pokemon, they're gamers. They're gamers. But they're playing. The Pokemon people are buying these cards to collect. They want to catch them all or whatever. And so if you have the chase version, like, everyone wants the chase version. No one cares about these $2 prints, like, unless you are just playing, of which there are not that many players.
No, and I think ultimately that's the truth of it. It is a scaling issue. I'm cynical, and I think the scaling issue is so far that, like, Magic is far and away, like, it is the biggest trading card game in the world. It's not even close. It's not. Yu-Gi-Oh! My understanding is
what about One Piece? What about One Piece?
The One Piece is real. Lorcana, baby, flesh and blood. No, I think there's still a lot. I think all the up and coming games are really, really interesting. I need to dive into them more because I like card games. But yeah, Magic is far and away the biggest card game, followed I think by Yu-Gi-Oh! And then Pokemon. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Is weird because it's a different game based on I don't need to get into it. But yeah, no. But the distance between place 1 and place 2 is so drastic because Magic has been around for so long and it has been so loved, and there's been so much put into the game. There's so many different ways you can play it, like you mentioned. Like, you can play the game without needing anything. You can go to a draft, you can go to a pre-release, you can crack packs and like play Pauper or whatever. You can play Standard. No one knows what Standard is.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, baby. That's a whole depressing topic. Yeah, no, like, you have so many different ways to play it that the game is built in such a way that it's so easy to pull someone in. It's so easy to get someone invested. It's so easy to have your interest pulled into different ways in case, like, a format in particular is in a crappy place right now. Oh, Modern's in shambles. I'm going to go play Standard. Standard's a piece of doo-doo. I'm going to play Pauper or Draft or whatever. Like, you can still be playing the game, but not be playing these particular things, which a lot of other card games, like, if they don't have the formats or, like, the diversity in the formats, like, it's your player base is kind of held hostage to what's going on. Yu-Gi-Oh! In particular is terrible at this. But yeah, I don't know. I think the gradient issue for Magic, I think it's actually fine. I think normal foil, normal or like regular base print foil, and then like a higher rarity version, both in foil and non-foil. I think that's fine enough. I think there's enough of a spectrum there that you can do what you need to do. I think it accomplishes it enough. The issue's always been like supply. Like, why isn't Double Masters a print on demand? Like, stuff like that. As soon as I heard about Modern Masters, like way back in the day, like the first and second print, I'm like, oh, this is sweet. And I asked my card shop, like, so like these packs are just going to be around forever? And they're like, well, we have one run. We're going to get like 8 boxes, and that's the only amount we're going to get. And my brain went, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't. That's actually, no, I take that back. It does solve certain things, but it doesn't ever address the core issue, which is staples are expensive, dude. They just are.
Well, and why are they expensive? It's because of scarcity, right? So
there's
not enough copies for the number of players who want copies of that. And so
Wizards is really good at that.
Yeah, it's a supply and demand thing, right? So it's weird because like, if you oversupply your product, if you make it so your modern masters 1, 2, 3 sets are just constantly on shelves, they're going to depreciate not only the cards' values within them, which is what everyone wants, but also the packs' values themselves. Because there will be so many copies of the cards that everyone wants floating around, there's no longer a need to buy that pack. And the worst possible outcome from a business perspective is that you would spend all of these resources to print all of these booster packs. Stores would buy the booster packs and then not sell any after however long. They would just have all these extra boxes sitting on shelves that players don't want to purchase because they can get their copy of exactly the card they want for whatever they deem to be the market value of that card. So I can get you go onto a whole economics tangent here for you, but I'll spare our listeners the longevity of that. It's basically boils down to the amount that I'm willing to spend on a card is its perceived value. So if I think that Mana Crypt is an $80 card, I'm willing to spend $80 on it. A Modern Masters booster pack is worth $20, but there's no certainty that I'm going to get it. So I buy 1 booster pack and maybe I win. I buy 2 booster packs and maybe I win.
Hit the button.
I buy 3 booster packs and I still haven't won yet, but if I might win on my 4th. That's like $100 right there. I could just spend $80 and guarantee my card. So I would rather pay the perceived value of the card rather than risk not having it, especially when I see that the variance on pulling these is much, much higher, right? And so that is what happens when cards get printed a lot. But the really bad thing from a business perspective is that, yeah, they've made their profit on all of these boosters that they've sold to stores, but now stores have all this extra product sitting on their shelves, sitting in their overstock and all of this stuff. They're not going to buy more cases from Wizards because they aren't sure that they're going to have like the product sold. They're not going to be able to sell the product once they receive it. They're afraid they're going to end up with a bunch more excess inventory. And so even if they do decide to buy some small limited quantity from Wizards, they're going to pull like a very small portion of Wizards print quantity and put it on their shelves. And when that sells out instantly, because it's popular and people want more of the packs, they're going to go back to Wizards and buy a little bit more, and then they're going to do the same thing. They'll buy a little bit more. But this is really negative for supply chain, like timing, so consumers get unhappy because they have to wait. And we all know that we are patient, greedy Magic players.
I want my Card Kingdom order now.
Right now. I'm going to pay the 10% premium for Card Kingdom because I live down the street from it, and I want it today. I'm not going to wait for that TCG player shipping, even if I'm going to save $20. Like, I'm just paying the premium. I'll pick it up on my way home from work. But then then it gets back to now WotC's still stuck holding the bag on all of these extra things they've printed and all of these resources they've sunk, and now they can't recoup that cost because they're going to hit a threshold, and now these packs aren't selling as well, so we have still a little bit in our inventory, and we're just not going to buy anymore. And now WotC's stuck with the overstock, and they have no way to get rid of it or recuperate their profits, their investments to make a profit. And so that is why we're stuck where we are right now.
Yeah, but I also think, like, I'll continue to use Pokemon as an example because I think it's a fantastic model, but, like, if you have like that overabundance of products and you want to create drive for people to keep buying packs, like those crazy chase cards exist. Like the amount of people that will just like buy a pack, like I think Lord of the Rings is an interesting test case because of like the serialized cards and like the hype that the One Ring the One Ring created, that Magic can go and point to. Yeah, we have a 1/1 $2 million card, suck it, Pokemon. Like that's my headcanon. That's the whole reason the Lord of the Rings set exists.
That's the dialogue.
That they are in the evil council room having their evil board meeting with their evil coffee and their evil spreadsheets going, how do we capitalism even harder? Like, this is the cynic in me talking nonsense. But like I can't imagine the conversation was anything different from that, because 2020 was such a interesting year for card games, and it still to this day fascinates me because of how Pokemon it just processed through that entire, like, they made out like bandits. Like, it is insane the amount of impact that Pokemon has had on all trading card games. Like, it is the standard for a lot of things. It has been tried and true. It is popular. It is talked about specifically because it's really good for opening packs in a number of different ways. And I think players benefit from it and collectors benefit from it. And I think Wizards got a little salty from that, or like Hasbro execs. I don't think it was Wizards. Probably Hasbro execs more than likely. And they go, well, how do we try and pull some of that back? How do we get that attention back? And I think the answer is just put chase cards into packs and let everybody else get their cheap cards.
I think that's a good point. I get stuck with this with my Cynic, where it's like my counter to that is, yeah, but people are just intrinsically greedy, and so the consumers are going to see like, oh, there's a chase version of that card. Well, I just really want the chase version of that card. Like, why is this so expensive? Like, I just want that version. It's the most expensive version. I want it. Why is it not printed? And so I think that's an issue that we run into too on the consumer side. Of the human condition, right? But I think it's there's a lot of complexity to the issue for sure.
Oh yeah, we're not gonna solve it. I don't think anyone's capable of solving it. Like, I agree.
There's definitely more that could be done from like the distributor side, from Wizards, from Hasbro. There's also a lot that could be done from the consumer side in terms of just like regulating the amount of money spent on singles versus sealed products, because I think, at least from our perspective as entrenched Magic players, and I think there's a fair amount of this, is that players who are entrenched in the game and like play competitively, play it more as a sport. We just want the cards that are good, and especially if we take pride in the fact that we think this card is good and we like want it and we want to like flex a little bit, we want the blingy version. So we're just gonna buy that version instead of like trying to chase it through boosters, right?
Or like we have credit winnings stored up because we're god gamers, and like the shop got the fancy version. Here are my winnings. I want the fancy version, you know?
Yeah. Whereas if you want to be a responsible consumer, like you should be moderating your spending on singles versus like you should also be purchasing packs, because it goes to the whole vote with your wallet thing, right? Which is an entirely different discussion that I have mixed feelings on as well. But like, if you want to see things get reprinted a lot, like you should be buying fewer singles, you should be buying more packs. But then if you do that,
and that gets into a slippery slope, though.
Well, I was gonna say, if you do that, it just like that also tanks the entire economics theory, right? Like, why am I paying $100 to try and maybe find this card that I value at $80? Like, I may hit something else that makes me break even or whatever, but I don't want that card. So then I have to go through extra work to go trade it or sell it to a shop or whatever, which then, if you count that effort, I'm spending additional time and money, so I'm actually still losing, right? So, like, there's a whole financial perspective that players can consider that isn't really what we are here to talk about today, but it is like, yeah, it's really complex.
It's a piece of the pie. It's a piece of the puzzle for certain. I don't know, I keep coming back to, okay, well then how much responsibility should we have and how much should we participate? I think is where I keep going to at the end of the day, because I think there exists like a decent middle ground where, like, I want to open a pack. Let's paint an ideal scenario. I want to be able to open a pack and feel like I have a reasonable chance of pulling something worthwhile, be it like a chase card or a staple or something. I want this card to have value. I want this card to ideally go up in price over time. But I also want to be able to like have this game be affordable and accessible to everybody. Where like, yeah, there are budget options, but also if you want to play something that's, you know, high tier and tier 1, that should not cost an arm and a leg. And I think that there can exist this like sort of middle ground. And this is where like proxies get a little bit murky to me, to kind of tie everything back, is like I don't know how I feel about someone who doesn't, I guess, economically participate in the game in some form of fashion. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Everyone comes from different backgrounds. It's just CEDH is the only card game competitively that you can print out the cards. And that's just different. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. And I still to this day don't know how I fully feel about it. Apart from it just, well, it is just different.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I'll out myself. Back when proxies first started to actually catch on for competitive, because back in the day they really weren't a thing. Like, it didn't matter where you were. Proxying was like something you could do with your friends at the kitchen table. You could play test the cards, sure, but there is no such thing as a proxy-friendly event for basically any format. Some people tried it with Vintage a little bit. They tried like limited proxy Vintage and stuff, and in unsanctioned events, and it still wasn't very popular. Cut forward in time, proxies are catching on.
It's the standard.
Yeah.
Your event needs to be full proxy.
Well, I wasn't even going to go that far. I was going to do a time skip here. I was going to say, like, cutting forward in time is, like, proxies are starting to catch on, and I, as an entrenched player, because nowhere allows proxies, at the time that I started playing Magic and Commander and even CEDH towards, like, because I was here at the beginning, guys. I was here when, like, building competitive decks, trying to do the fastest, meanest thing first started. I remember, what's her name? Damia. I remember Damia when that deck dominated.
Classic.
Yeah.
A fine wine, that one.
Not really. That tank. That was like, that was a dollar brewski that just... But the point is that, like, the proxy thing, as an entrenched player, I, at first, was anti-proxy. I felt slighted, and I was like, why are these people who have no involvement to the game, like, financially, they're not risking anything, they're coming to these events that are, like, local game night events or whatever, and they're playing at a shop that I'm playing at, and they're playing these fake cards that it costs them $2.50 to print out, and if they win a match, they walk away with, like, booster packs from this Friday Night Magic event or whatever. Or they aren't sanctioned, so it wasn't that. But that was the idea, is, like, you win booster packs or you win store credit or something. It's like, why are these people, like, just because, by virtue of them being late to the party, why are they benefiting? So I sat with that for a little while, salty about it. But then, like, moving forwards in time again, my evolution as a player, I get to a point where I'm even beyond, like, prizing and stuff is great, but even beyond that, like, at that point, I'm entrenched in the format. I own basically, like, everything under $2,000 in the format, like, at least one copy of it in an actual printing. Like, it's legal to play at a WotC event, right? But even so, I don't care about proxies anymore, really, because I have reached a point in my career where it's all about, like, the quality of the game. And if players are playing with access to every card in the format, they're playing with higher quality cards on average, at least, and that is going to contribute. Yeah, in theory, some weirdos out there, even with access to an entire card pool, play like shit tier cards like Stunt Double and Cloud Shift. I don't know why,
Blood Pet.
but they do. So the point with that is that, like, these contribute to higher quality games, which are more enjoyable for everyone because all the players get to do something. And they result in less bad feelings. Higher quality games result in less bad feelings as players walk away from the table related to that game specifically. Now, maybe it's just me that's gone through this arc. Maybe it's an arc that everyone goes through as they, like, sort of like, I've bought into this game. Oh, proxies are a thing. Is like a valley, and then, like, you start to climb back out of them and be like, oh yeah, but also the games are just better if players, like, don't have the disposable income to spend on these cards because not everyone's fortunate, right? So, and at that point, it's like, maybe it's just a journey that everyone's going to go through, is be like, oh well, proxies, buy the cards. Oh, proxies are a thing. Proxies suck. Oh, proxies are okay. Oh, proxies are really great. Because I know a lot of players who don't have access to the cards. They don't have the disposable income because they got real life stuff going on. Who are really good players, but they wouldn't be able to play the game without taking a significant break from their life and life expenses.
Which is just unrealistic and you should not do.
Exactly. That said, there are also a fair number of players who are like, oh, I can proxy everything. and I honestly, I think this is probably, at least from my experience, I think this is on the higher percentage of this spectrum, is players who say, oh, I can proxy everything, great, I don't have to invest anything, and there's a shot that I can win XYZ. Like, oh, I can win a dual land at this tournament for a $25 entry fee plus the $4 it'll cost me to print out these cards at the Kinko's. Okay, well, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to win. These players print out the decks, and they don't have the depth of knowledge for the format. They don't have the depth of knowledge for that, even that deck specifically. They don't know how to play the game in general. They come in and they get thwomped, and then they leave either upset, or maybe they have a great time, but they get thwomped because they don't know what they're doing. And I think that there are a lot of players, probably more than 51%, who just come into a format that fully allows proxies, and they just go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do all this, like full proxy, try and make a return on my investment, and get just mollywood, right? But then as those players, if they like the format, they have a good experience because of these playtest cards, these proxies, they start to get entrenched and they gain that depth of format. And it has also been my experience that depth of format and that idea of, oh, hey, I enjoy the game, is like, that also factors into like the social prestige thing, right? Like, it's also a collectible game. So if you like, you're like, yeah, maybe I won an event with an all proxy deck, but like also like, now I want to own my deck because it'll feel better. It's like more of a prestige. It's like, oh, so I'm going to start collecting cards. And like, maybe you do proxy the dual lands forever, and that doesn't detract anything from how valid a win is or anything like that.
At this point, I'm of the opinion you should just proxy your duels.
Yeah, right? Like, they're so expensive. There's no reason for anybody to own
those cards.
Like,
I
even the revised versions.
Yeah,
there's no reason for anyone to own those.
I have one duel. I realistically want to own like the Jund duels because that's my colors for life, for real. But like, I'm not gonna buy an Underground Sea. I'm not gonna buy a Volcanic. Are you kidding me? No way. That's a joke.
Yeah, but I mean like so even that, right? Like why do you want to own the Jund duels?
It means something to me. Like that is something that I, as my own entrenched Magic player, these are the colors that I have always identified with. Their play styles that I have liked. Modern Jund is still far and away one of my favorite collections of cardboard I have ever played with. Like that is just me, and that is like to me that is the ultimate expression of like, these are the cards that help represent me the most. Like in this like weird shrine thing. Like these are like the creme de la creme of like, yes, this is what I identify with, and that's me, and that's my own perceived value of those things.
Yeah, but bottom line, it's because it makes you feel good to own them as opposed to proxying them, right?
It's
like,
something
it just
that
feels better.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier. Alice, have you ever played like an MMO at all?
I am not a big online gamer, but I played like one or two.
Okay. So there's this, I don't think there's a term for it. If there is, I'm stupid. But there's this idea where you're bringing someone into like this really like deep, complex game, and you go, okay, cool. Here's everything at the start. Now, the person who sticks with that game likely would have built up to that stuff anyway, and they were going to have a much better time on the journey, whereas other people will play for a night and then never log in again, because what's the point? And I feel like I can see something similar happening with CDH, but also I don't know of a better way to do it, because I think of the people who go to like an all proxy event because like their friends or like the kitchen table is like, hey, there's this cool tournament going on. It's full proxies. We can like play something cool. And like you said, like someone gets hooked on it. They start learning everything. They start wanting to actually own the cards because that's going to mean a lot to them. You know, they're in a Gila list or their Yuriko list or whatever that they proxied. Like the feeling of getting that last proxy out and that preferred print, that whatever, like that is a very tangible feeling. I think that's why a lot of us like card games to some degree, like that aspect of collectability, that aspect of the self-identifying part, you know. And I think of, you know, like the me dumping, you know, like 10 million gold in your lap on your day one, have fun, like here's the cheat codes to the kingdom. People are just going to get bored with it and then leave, and I think that's fine. But also I don't think that it's incorrect. because I like that ease of on ramp of like the monetary cost to play CDH is low. However, the time, effort, and like emotional intelligence investment, that's high. And I think I'm fine with that exchange. Yeah, I think I'm fine with that exchange.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I don't know. I'm one of those weirdos who's like, just give me the 10 million gold and I'll figure out what to do with it. But
also, I think if you were told to make that 10 million gold and it was in, I'll stick with the MMO example. If it was in an MMO that you like, there was something that kept you going, I don't think that would have changed anything for you in particular.
I mean, probably not, but also, like, I'd prefer to just start with the 10 million gold up, right?
Oh, well, yeah. Okay. I see your point. No, I do, but like, yeah. Okay, continue.
Yeah, aside from silliness aside, I do think that it brings up the discussion of proxies brings up an interesting point I have heard from several pro proxy advocates before. And this goes back to something I said earlier, the whole vote with your wallet argument, right?
Yeah.
So something we've talked about before, and I've encountered when discussing with things with other people outside of us, is that playing at shops, and our shops has not allowed proxies before for events. Playing at shops who do not allow proxies for their CEDH events encourages those shops to continue to not allow proxies, which is makes the game less accessible, and that's not great. And so we should vote with our wallet by not going to that event and not supporting that store.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that it's a really interesting argument because you're not wrong in the fact that if you don't go somewhere and spend money there, you are not supporting that idea, and there is, by not supporting something, there is a chance, expressing your displeasure, there's a chance that you could get it changed, right? I think that's a little bit different when it comes to something like CEDH, especially when you're talking about like a tournament situation where the people who are going to be playing at this shop, no matter what, we're going to actually be the patrons of XYZ shop, because that's their store and they live there and they go there. They're going to spend money. They're going to go to the thing. They're accustomed to the rules. They're accustomed to the regulations. They're going to go to the event. They're going to play the event. They're going to spend their money there anyways. The people who are going to vote with their wallets are people who are not going anyways. Like on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis. And so, like, realistically, your vote doesn't matter because it doesn't exist because you're not detracting anything. And so a better solution, I believe, would be to, if possible, find a way to compete in these events to the highest degree you're able, which like sort of leans to more like try and find budget substitutes, which is doable for some things, but hard or nigh impossible for other things. It just kind of depends on what you're playing. But like, do your best, or like go with a friend, get somebody to lend you some cards, go compete in this event, or even just send a message to a store, like call them and ask politely, be respectful always. Talk about proxies, talk about how it makes things more accessible, and have that discussion with them, and express that like, man, it stinks that I won't be able to compete or like go to this event because I don't have the resources to play it as such. But like maybe in the future, if you do decide to allow proxies, like I would love to go and play at your event, and then you would incur my business because I would be able to go there to this location. So I think that I'm a dynamic person. Sometimes I like to work outside. I think that the best way to do something is by working outside the system. I think in this case specifically, I think that the best way to sort of like push for proxies in an environment where proxies aren't allowed is to work within the system and sort of like do your best to do that. I know that that's how we've gotten to.
That's how we've arrived at where we are.
That's how we've been going on it. And like honestly, a big part about it is if you talk to your fellow players, especially like the whales, the players who do own everything, and convince them, show them through experience that the games that where players who don't have access to cards because of monetary reasons are going to be lower quality than the ones where players can proxy, and like play games with them, show them the difference, and eventually, like, if you can get one or two of those guys on your side, then they can also have that conversation. And like, it's the whole ally thing, right? It's like, those are the people who like already fit whatever the demographic of like those who are
ideal
accepted.
WotC customer.
Yeah, exactly. Those who are like accepted by the stores already. They're on your side. They're like, hey, I own everything, but I also think it'd be really cool if we allowed proxies, because that would mean that this person could play, and they're a really good player, but for any number of possible reasons, they don't own cards and they can't buy cards. But I'd really love to play with them in an event and see just how good they can do. So I think that working within the system is a much better way to get this specific thing accomplished. Even though it will take longer, I think in general the results will be higher quality, and they will have more of an impact transformationally on a store and a community within that store.
And like I think even for those situations where, like, for example, like me and you have definitely floated the idea that like our shop is tough because we don't allow proxies. I'm not saying that as like a binary thing, but more so like a lot of us have to get creative with like the strategies we want to make use of and how to like combat like a lot of the format, because our average, like your average pod at one of our weeklies is going to be a very you're gonna taste the whole spectrum of commander. Like, you're gonna have someone sit down with an off-the-shelf precon. You're gonna have someone that's built an upgrade. You're gonna have someone that's playing like high power CDH. Like, you're gonna taste all of that. I think you can exist inside of a proxy-less scenario. You just have to find strategies that work with what you have. Also, like you mentioned, the social prestige thing. Like, as you go to these shops, you're gonna start meeting people. You're gonna start talking to people. Ideally, if you like the shop enough, you're gonna start talking to people. You'll figure out who to talk to. You'll ask, like, hey, is it all right to borrow this? Are you using this? Like, we're I continue to be impressed with how like fast we all jump on. You need this card? I have this card. I'm not using this card. Here, please use this card. Like, we all are so on board with trying to pull in as many people as possible. That like you can like work around these things and eventually work your way up to, or hopefully having the shop work your way into being allowing some number of proxies. And I just think that's also a big part of the card game, is the social aspect. Like, you will find those whales that have every single card. They're not playing every single card in 99 or 98 cards. They might even have duplicates.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I did want to touch on like budget a bit more. I don't know. Budget can exist in CDH, in my opinion. I think there's enough. You have enough wiggle room to figure out like a ways to make most colors work. And I think you shut certain strategies off when you have to play without proxies and you don't have access to a lot of cards. I think like Breach and Naz are like the main examples of that, because you need the life total for Naz, so you need to be able to play duels. Shocks are going to hurt too much, and if you're on Breach, I've never personally done Breach decks with LED because I'm a pleb, but like I have heard like the difference between having an LED and not having an LED for Breach is a pretty night and day difference.
I think if we're talking about budget substitutions, because this is how I got my start back in the day. Once again, back in the day, when I started playing CDH, I was a poor like middle school, elementary school, I don't know, something like that. And didn't have really any money to spend on the card game that I liked, and proxies weren't a thing at that point. So I had to find, like you say, creative ways to compete with budgetless players who were at the LGS. My first real competitive deck was Narset and Light Master, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I was playing Basalt Monolith and some Talismans and some Signets, and I think probably one of the, outside of like the turn spells, which I scrimped and saved for, probably the most expensive card in my whole deck was Talisman of Progress, because that card was like $15.
Oh god, yeah, I remember those days. What the hell?
And I went to the first competitive tournament at my LGS, really excited, and I sat down at my first table because it was just 2 rounds. It was just 2 rounds. It was competitive EDH night, 2 rounds, sort of like how we do it now at our local shop. And it was, all right, you're gonna play a pod. Winner's gonna get paired up to a winner's pod. all the other 3 players are going to get paired down to a couple losers pods, and then the winners from the other pods are going to get paired up as well. You're going to play a second game, and the winner of that wins the whole tournament, wins a bunch of store credit. It's like, wow, this is really cool. Sit down, first game, and I'll say I got really lucky in my first game. My opponents like bricked on lands and stuff, and then somebody played a card that I read a line of text that they did not read, and it fixed my colors for me. I was able to cast Narset with a haste enable and swing and win the game. This was before Draneth Magistrate ruined her life. But then I played round 2, and this I'm sitting down with, like, the first round was like a couple people like me, like somebody who had like a really expensive deck, like they were playing Mana Crypt, City of Traders. And I was like, oh my gosh, those cards are really cool. How do I get one of those? And the guy's like, that's like $300. I was like, oh, I'm never gonna have one of those. Yes, cut to now that I do. But go into the second pod there, and I sit down, and I think like one of the first cards played at the table was like a Mana Crypt or something, followed by like dual lands and like Force of Wills, and before these were before any of the like the reprints or anything. So they're like really expensive, but like Force of Wills, people are throwing around. Someone threw around an actual Time Twister because they weren't allowing proxies. Like I'm gonna cast this spell gets Force of Will, Pact of Negation, all this stuff, and I'm like over here like, yeah, I'm gonna play my land and cast my Mass Hysteria. I'm gonna play my other tap land and then play a Soul Ring and cast my Signet. And then, like, just the game goes on, and, like, all these players are doing their thing, and it's like, cast a Basalt Monolith, okay, next turn, cast Narset, give her haste, attack, and spin and win the game, right? It's just, like, one of those things where budgets can work, because people just ignore you if you're not playing optimal cards, but they don't tend to if people respect the fact that any deck at that table has the potential to win, at least. That said, I've definitely been bodied by, like, mono red decks like Soul Fim or like literal precons before in our local comp nights. So like sometimes the CDH decks we joke about it, but sometimes the CDH decks get stuck fighting CDH decks doing CDH things, and the casual players is over there paying 6 mana for a 5/5 at like an extremely fair rate, and then they do that 3 more times and go to combat, and suddenly someone has died.
Yeah.
Like
I have been bodied several. We have a I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He plays like white-black drain stacks. He has locked me out of casting any single spell because I was too busy doing other things. And I look over, I'm like, oh, you have 2 4/4s, and every single time I take any sort of game action, I lose 3 life. I am at 6 life.
Yeah, right? You're like, man, I was ignoring you. I was so focused on winning the game that I forgot that, like, you were playing the game too.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's totally a real thing.
CDH players get full of themselves, so like, don't think that you can't compete just because you're on a budget. Yeah, and you just have to be a little bit more creative, like we were saying.
Definitely.
Like, ad nause, I think even ad nause is probably still playable. Is it going to be the efficient turbo ad nauseum strategy that everyone like thinks about in CDH? No. You're not playing Roxy without like having at least some variety of budget.
It's all right. If you're hanging with us, we're teaching you not to play Roxy anyway, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah. You play Roxy, you're a monster.
Yeah.
Also, you have to go first to win. But aside from that, it's like, in seriousness, it's ad nauseum is probably still, you just have to play it differently and construct your deck differently, right? I think that said, I do think there are certain strategies, or at least cards, that have no viable like substitutes in the format either. And I think that number is pretty small. But it's
like 3 cards, probably.
It's like Gaia's Cradle doesn't have a viable substitute. Like, there are things that can do the same effect as Gaia's Cradle, but you have to jump through so many hoops on your way to get there.
It's not Gaia's Cradle.
Yeah. Like, what's the flip, the enchantment thing?
No, it's not Invasion.
No, it's older than that. It's older than Invasions.
I know it's an Ixalan 3 CMC enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top like 4 or 6, put a creature. If you have 4 more, it flips. Oh god.
Well, we're not going to get that without
I literally just read the card off in my head.
But basically it flips into a Gaia's Cradle. Like, yes, that card does flip into Gaia's Cradle, but you have to pay 3 mana, it has to resolve, and you have to keep 4 creatures on the board until the end of your turn. At which point you then still need to get back to your turn in order to make make maximum use of the cradle, right?
Yep.
You can't tutor it with lands tutors, which is like one of the big things. It's just not as good.
It's not like the next closest thing is Circle of Dreams Druid. That's triple green for a 1/2,
a 1/1 that can't even tap until the next turn, right?
Yeah.
Or there's like Nykthos, but then that still requires you to build up a board so that you can make a devotion, and sink extra mana into it. Like, these cards are just not Gaia's Cradle. There's just not a suitable replacement for that effect.
Decent adjacent replacements.
If your deck doesn't rely on Cradle as a combo piece, you can play them, and they might be fine if you're on a budget. But it's not the same. The other one that jumps immediately to my mind is Lion's Eye Diamond. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can do the Lion's Eye Diamond combo with Brain Freeze, using Lotus Petal as a substitute. Does that mean that you should ever even consider playing the Brain Freeze combo without Lion's Eye Diamond in CADH? Absolutely not. Like, will you sometimes, if you're on a budget and your shop doesn't allow proxies or whatever, and you just really want to play the combo? Sure, you can. But it should never be one of those things where it's like, I don't own an LED. Oh, this is the Jeskai combo. If that's the case, then unfortunately, it's like, maybe we should look at a different way to win the game with this deck. Even if it is in Jeskai. So even if that means you go to like a little more suboptimal combo. But so like LED, if I have to pick one more off the top of my head, yeah, I guess there's Intuition.
Gilded Drake, kind of, but Gilded Drake's just a good removal spell.
I feel like Gilded Drake, like, most of the time, you can achieve a similar effect with a good removal spell, or like a clone, or something like that. It's just the fact that it does both for one card is just super, super optimal, especially since it's so hard to interact with. I was actually gonna jump to, like, I think probably my third pick, if I'm only picking 3, because I can think of 4. We'll do 4. Nether Void, which is a 4-mana enchantment, says anytime any player casts a spell, counter it unless they pay 3 additional mana. It's a triggered ability. There is no other effect in the game that does that as well. And
they're never going to make another effect like that either, especially at that CMC.
No, they're not.
Never.
It's for 4 mana, and it's super easy to cast at black-3. So, yeah, just not going to happen. There's just no suitable substitute. You're better off finding a different stack species. And then, of course, the other one is Chains. This was the one that jumped to my head first, but Chains of Mephistopheles. There just isn't another card that functions like Chains, that has a similar rate to Chains, that is played in the same decks Chains is played in, which these days is close to 0, but like it's such a unique card, and that is realistically what differentiates all of these cards. Is it's such a unique effect that for like such an efficient rate, it's like it's very unique, and or it's very just so incredibly efficient that they don't have really budget substitutes.
Yeah, I'd still throw Intuition into the mix personally. That no other card in Magic entombs 2 perfect cards and gives you the exact answer for 3 mana at instant speed. Yeah. I think that falls into like
that's not true. There's Gifts and Given. It's just not legal in Commander.
I think that's a card that would actually pull me into blue really hard. I love Gifts and Given so
much.
That
card, I don't think that card, as a blue player who would love to play Gifts, as someone who would personally love to play Gifts and Given, I'm telling you right now, that card can never be.
No, I'm totally.
If
totally
you thought
aware.
Intuition was strong, I promise you, Gifts is so much better.
No.
1 more mana, easy. In a format where black 3 is like considered easy. The floor of turbo wins, like blue 3, instant speed, get 2 cards, bin 2 cards of your choosing, is just ridiculous.
No, I'm very fully aware that Gifts can never see the light of day, but like that is I do love Gifts. I do like Intuition. It is one of the few blue cards I do like.
It's so good. I love Intuition. Yeah, I love skill Intuition. True Intuition piles are
boring. Storm. Yeah, I also going back to you triggered this thought. Kind of going back to the analogy of like the MMO player and like 10 million gold. Like I think if you will also just like if you're a good player, you will find a way to like figure out how to navigate your situation. And I think that's an interesting part of card games is like Sometimes you're just not going to have the cards that you need for your deck available, so you got to get creative. You got to start thinking outside the box. You got to start changing your strategy just a little bit to like adapt to what you have going on. I think that's a really fun part of card games. I love like oh, I need this one card, but I don't have it. Okay, what can I do? What do I have available readily that can work in this situation? Do I need to change to something entirely? Because sometimes like that's just brewing, baby. That's just a part of brewing.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's one of the most fun aspects of the game.
It's a huge part of the card game experience.
All right, well, I think that basically wraps us up for tonight. I will give a quick plug on September 9th, which is next weekend. Myself and a couple of other members of our local little CDH group are going to be traveling down to the Portland area to play in a tournament they have down there at Guardian Games. And that event, drum roll, is full proxy, as most events are. So should be accessible to anyone who's interested in going. Hopefully we'll see some of you sweet, awesome, beautiful listeners down there.
You won't see me, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately Joe will not be able to make it this time. But another event coming up soon, I'm sure. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. Looking forward to playing down in the Portland area.
All right. Well, Atlas, fantastic conversation, as always.
As always.
And to our listeners, thanks for listening. Stay wonderful. We'll catch you next time.